Welcome to the Open Loop podcast. It's a podcast exploring the people, companies, and ideas shaping the future of neurotechnology. I'm Chay Carter, the founder of Carter Sciences, Recce Neuro, and the Neurotech newsletter. In each episode, I sit down with founders, operators, researchers, investors, and leaders building the edge of neuroscience, neurotechnology, and healthcare. We'll have honest conversations about people's journeys into the neurotech industry, what they're currently building, how it's going, the realities, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what the future holds for the neurotech industry in general. Welcome to the next episode of the Open Loop podcast. I'm joined today by Frank Desiere, CEO, founder of CorTec. Frank, I'll let you introduce yourself and a little bit about what you guys are working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Chay. Really a pleasure to be here today. Frank Desiere, as you said, CEO of CorTec. We're in the neurotech space. We're a company, a leader, worldwide leader in the brain-computer interface technology. And at the same time, we're also providing our technology to other companies who want to join our mission in bringing these technologies to patients and improve their health through neurotechnology.
I love that. The BCI space, obviously super fascinating, like kind of the hottest topic right now in neurotech. How did you get into the space? You've got quite a unique background. I won't spoil it by reading out your LinkedIn profile, but what was your journey into becoming CEO of CorTec?
Yeah, a long journey, obviously. You see, I have a few years of experience on my back. But I'm a biologist by training, actually. Later, a PhD in molecular biology from ETH in Zurich. And I worked a bit in R&D, 10 years around. And after doing an MBA, I ended up in the business on the dark side. But working on medical devices for the longest time as part of Roche Diagnostics in that regard, on innovation topics, on M&A topics, then joining the business, being responsible for strategy, portfolio management, always things that look into the future of how to bring technologies to patients. And that's really my passion, I have to say. I'm both interested in novel technologies and science, biology, medicine, but also I'm very interested in bringing these new technologies to patients in need. And that gives me a lot of satisfaction. And when I came across this opportunity, I was intrigued. First of all, because obviously I didn't understand much, so I learned a bit about it. But what I discovered was really fascinating. And it was fascinating because I saw that bioelectronic medicine has potentials that are underestimated and undervalued, and that you can potentially help patients in areas where drugs and other treatments cannot reach. And I found CorTec to be actually a raw diamond in this area, which has developed a fantastic technology, which is underappreciated. And I thought this is a nice challenge to take on. And so I ended up as the CEO of CorTec, and I'm really thrilled about how we can help patients with this technology going forward.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. It's interesting, isn't it? It's a global industry, neurotech, but often the headlines are often dominated by the big US players. I think because money kind of dominates those conversations, and we have the big BCI players with Neuralink and Synchron and Paradromics and Precision, but you guys have been taking a lot of the headlines too. So it's really fascinating to see. With my newsletter, I think me and you are constantly in conversation about the latest thing we're going to include. I mean, what's the journey been like for you since it's been there? There's been a lot of headlines to cover, but talk us through that a little bit about what you guys have done.
Yeah, we've reached some important milestones now, including obviously the first in human implantation of our brain-computer interface last year. Now we have 3 patients implanted. We have fantastic outcomes in these patients, improvements in their medical condition and stroke rehabilitation in that regard. And as a result of that, we've received breakthrough device designation in April. And were invited by the FDA into the Total Life Cycle Advisory Program, the TAP program. So we're really happy about this. But CorTec, when you look at its foundation, 15 years back, was founded as a BCI company with the vision to help patients with electronic medicine, right?
Mm,
And you can imagine at the time, this was really a pioneering thought. And there were no Neuralink and other companies around. So the founders of the company. I'm not a founder, by the way. I'm the current CEO, but not a founder. But the founders were really visionary people at the time who had this idea of using electronic neurotechnology to help patients in need, and that was radical thinking at the time.
mm,
So ever since the foundation, obviously the company developed electrodes, then brought this into preclinical testing, then the entire system, the how to read brain data, how to stimulate the brain. And it was quite a journey, which required a lot of resilience of the
mm.
company to get it to this point. But I'm particularly proud to be now CEO at that interesting time of the company when so much important milestones have been achieved. And I'm really enthusiastic about the future, bringing the company into the realm of clinical treatment of more patients, different indications, and bringing this technology to full fruition. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. Like certainly in the stroke space too, there's a lot of innovation happening in the stroke neurotech space in general, but the BCI market is still pretty untouched. I mean, was stroke always the number one priority to go after for you guys from an indication, or what was the plan?
No, I think that developed over time, and it has to do a lot with the scientific community. CorTec has had a large focus to establish or play a role in the scientific network. It
Mm,
established itself also as a credible partner for many leading academic institutions. And over the years, there were some notable institutions that came to CorTec with the idea, and they put together with us, with our scientists, some really radical ideas together. And one of them, the early ones, were around stroke, actually, where this institution, and this was the University of Washington in Seattle, Professor Ojiman and Heron, they saw the potential in our ability to stimulate the brain. And we
mm,
could read the brain, right? We've shown that. But what differentiates our technology from other notable other companies like Neuralink and Paradromics and others is we can stimulate the brain, and this opens up whole new possibilities for the treatment of patients, namely bringing therapeutic applications to patients. And we teamed up with those leading academics to request grant money, in this case from the NIH, and we were successful. So this is how it came upon. But they're not the only ones. We have another important partnership with the Mayo Clinic in epilepsy, for example. We work with the University Center, Medical Center in Utrecht on paralysis. We work on depression with the University of Freiburg. So we have a
wow.
whole program linked to academic leaders in the world, which shows the versatility of our platform.
It's really interesting, actually. This conversation I have a lot in the space about founders of businesses, and there's often two different angles. There's the technical side where you're building amazing technology and you realize it can, read and react, and closed loop technology, signal processing. It sounds like you've got a lot of these like amazing technologies bundled into one. But then there's also the other side of founders who are maybe coming from like a psychiatry background or a specific indication that they're focusing on. And it sounds like you guys came from the tech background and you're realizing now that the application is really broad and stroke just happens to be the first one, or maybe getting the most headlines at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we are certainly most advanced in stroke and we are most differentiated in stroke. We are the only ones with a breakthrough device designation in stroke rehabilitation with an implant of that regard. So we are really differentiated. I mean, you know that the BCI field has basically two fields now, two segments. One is the reading the brain for communication applications, for assistive applications, so that you can steer a computer, using brain signals or an exoskeleton and so forth. That's the majority of the companies, and we can do that too. In addition, there's this therapeutic segment which is emerging, and we are clearly the leader in it as of today with our stroke application and upcoming work in epilepsy and others, because we have the ability to not only read the brain, but also write into the brain, meaning
Mhm.
stimulate the brain and really heal the brain itself, which is largely different from just reading the signals. Right. And this is so exciting because a recent estimation by Morgan Stanley, the investment bank in the bank in the US, which has done a nice report on BCI applications and the future market, really established clearly that the therapeutic BCI market will be 10 times as large as the
Mm.
BCI communication market. This is very exciting for us because we can tap in this market.
So how does this differ from like a deep brain stimulation device? Like something like NeuroPace, for instance, who have like, they have a implantable EEG, but they're reading and they're trying to spot epileptic seizures, for instance. You guys obviously can do more advanced BCI equivalent of that, but the stimulation stuff, how does that sit in the DBS realm?
Absolutely. It uses the same mantras, and it just happens that our device and technology is particularly powerful because we can use it not only with surface electrodes, which is our current focus, we can connect to our electronics, which you see in the background here, actually. This is
Right.
the plant as it is implanted into 3 patients now for the first patient for 9 months. But what we can do is we can use the same electronics with it closed loop stimulation capability with surface electrodes, with the brain electrodes, ECOG electrodes on the surface of the brain, but also on the surface of the dura, and potentially also outside of the skull, actually, to apply reading and stimulation of the brain. And that makes our technology a super versatile technology for many different applications. We can continuously stream brain data from the brain to the computer. That's why it's a BCI, a brain computer interface. Whereas other medical therapeutic devices have a fixed stimulation. They cannot read more data than they were programmed to read. They're very simple, let's call it. So we see our device as the next neurostimulation platform, which is versatile, capable, and can be applied in many different therapeutic areas.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's so much advancement happening in the stroke space at the moment. You know, there's like Mobia, and there's like non-invasive sort of stimulatory devices. There's all sorts of different things, but to have this BCI and DBS type combination is really, really unique. I mean, there's something like I wrote an article about the stroke space recently, but obviously I think your FDA stuff was center to that article. But there's like 9 million patients a year in the space, and there's no approved implantable therapy.
Right.
It's one. I think often the difficult part with these implantable devices, and you know, we worked in the space for a little while now. Is access to patients. You know, it's like in severe cases, patients are more open to it, but there's less severe cases where patients may be more apprehensive, or there's a lot of the time it's the actual, you know, doctors themselves who aren't maybe aware of this technology or aren't able to offer it to patients. But what's your approach? Are you thinking that far ahead at the moment? I appreciate it's 3 patients, but are we thinking that
Yes,
far ahead about like patient access and reimbursement?
absolutely. I mean, your first point is so important, and I want to take it up as well. I mean, the number of patients that are waiting for treatment is huge in stroke, particular, but also I have to say in other brain disorders. Brain disorders is the leading cause for disability in the world. Unfortunately, and the WHO has estimated that 1 in 3 people in the world will be affected by brain diseases in their lifetime. 1 in 3, which is massive. So the problem is bigger than cancer and cardiovascular diseases together, actually, from a
Wow.
burden and from a healthcare system perspective. It's a real tragedy, particularly in stroke. As you know, many stroke patients, I think 50% of stroke patients remain with a with a impairment for the rest of their life once they have followed the first 6 months of rehabilitation, the acute phase rehabilitation. And the doctors usually have to tell them, sorry, that's it. We cannot help you any further. And that's the worst thing that any patient wants to hear, is there's no other options for them. And they have to live with the impairment for the rest of their life. And here's our device and our treatment comes into play. And in the patients we have now in our study, the 3 patients, they had stroke. They were affected by stroke many years back, 4 to 5 years, and they're well beyond the initial rehabilitation and have realized for years there's no progress. And this is why these patients have volunteered to be included in our study, because it gives them hope to lead a better life, to have their function back, to do things again with their hands. Imagine Keith, for example, he could play the piano again after years of the impairment, and this is a fantastic story of and independence that we could bring back to the patient. And this is what we want to bring to millions of patients waiting for this kind of improvement.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, look, there's the part of the core piece of my article was like, yeah, there's the rehab piece ends very quickly, right? Like you either gain function very, very quickly. Like my grandma had a ton of silent strokes and didn't even realize it. And then all of a sudden one day fell over, went to the doctors and they said, hey, this is what's happened. And it was just like, she was 90. So there wasn't much chance of recovery from that, but it was very much, you notice immediately like, okay, you either get the feeling back in your hand, you either get that movement back, you can either start walking again in like 2 weeks. Otherwise it's very tough. So to be able to have an option after that, obviously a 90-year-old is probably not the core demographic here, but I think there's the age of people getting strokes or having strokes is dropping every year, isn't it? I think it's probably in its 50s or something now. So it's,
yes, it is.
It's
I
interesting.
mean, the question about access to patients is obviously very important, and particularly when you talk about invasive technologies. And here we're talking about a craniotomy, right? It's implanted in your head, but it sits above the brain, right? And I always say the surgery, and we have now experience with 3 patients at least, is it sounds worse than it is. It is a 90-minute surgery, and the patients walk home the next day. So it's
Wow.
less invasive, I would say, than a hip or knee replacement, in a way where people have to stay in the hospital for 4 weeks and they lose a lot of blood and there's a lot of complications possible. So it's not that bad. And I'm sure with all the developments, also in the press, obviously, of other companies and procedures, these kind of interventions gain more acceptance over time. People start to get acquainted with the idea to, have a brain surgery done. Yeah, it's not such a big deal anymore. Um, One important factor for our stroke treatment is that our device is removed after the 6-week treatment period, or a bit longer, right? But it's eventually removed from the people, and the positive impact for movement is retained. That means these patients will not be living with this device for the rest of their lives. So it's a temporary device that applies a treatment to improve their movement. That's very important and
Yeah.
increases the acceptability by a large factor.
Yeah, that's a game changer. I don't think I was aware of that. That's amazing. I mean, that's about the restoration, isn't it? Really, and that's to get. Is that the power of the stimulation of the device? It's
Yes,
restoring that like neuroplasticity to some degree, or
exactly. That's the target. So
right.
we can show now that our device, with the stimulation that we apply during the 6 weeks treatment period, really helps the brain to learn again, to steer again independently the upper limbs of these patients which had been paralyzed. And after the end of the treatment, this improvement is maintained. This means the brain has obviously been helped to
Mm.
coordinate the upper limbs again, and that's really the plasticity that we've been able to improve of the brain. And that's a fundamental shift also from a scientific perspective, because so far it has been believed the brain after stroke cannot learn again. And we have disproven this previous belief. And we've shown that even after years after stroke, through the right stimulation of the brain, through electrical signals, we can help the brain relearn procedures, coordination, and so on. It's a breakthrough.
That's incredible. I mean, so there's not like a window. There's not like you need to get this sorted in the first month or whatever. You can do it at any period afterwards. So people who have had maybe stroke 5 years ago and are
Yes.
maybe still struggling with rehabilitation.
Yes.
That's amazing.
This is important because it provides hope for all these patients, and it provides naturally a much larger patient population than the 9 million new patients each year. There is
Wow.
dozens of or even hundreds of millions of patients waiting for such a new treatment, and that makes it very attractive from a business case perspective, but also very hopeful from a public health perspective, because we're able to help all these patients to lead a better life.
I mean, that's really interesting, and it opens up obviously the conversation about the other indications that you were looking at too, right? We were talking about a certain time period. I wonder, because I interviewed Dan Rizzuto from Therapeutics, who's talking about neurodegenerative disease and memory disorders, and neuroplasticity and memory and so forth, and how they go hand in hand. It's really interesting stuff. But like to look at it from a depression, for instance. I'm curious I guess we'll see from the studies, right? Like removing it after a certain period of time, is that a permanent fixture? Because there's lots of wearable neurostimulation devices out there at the moment.
So our device utilization would depend on the use case. Where in stroke, it's a 6-week treatment, we can remove it afterwards, and it's done and improvement is there. In both epilepsy and depression, you would look into a different mode of action, right? You would plan for a lifelong utilization of the implant, because you need stimulation monitoring and stimulation potentially for a lifelong period. And this is also an important factor in our device. This device that you see here has been designed to stay lifelong in the head of a patient. So the materials, the functionality has from the get-go been designed for decades of utilization in the head of a patient. And as of today, we already have data that shows 500 days of uninterrupted utilization in non-human primates. This data was generated in Japan at the University of Osaka, and it was so compelling that it went into Nature publication right away. We have a new publication which has just been accepted to be presented at the Graz BCI symposium, that shows 4 years of uninterrupted use of our technology in dogs, and that's unprecedented. So the longevity of a device is critical, and you may know that different electrodes the signals may fade over time. There's been issues with other companies that use penetrating electrodes. Our electrodes have been shown for years, at least in animal studies now, that they can work in an uninterrupted, in the same level of quality over many years. So that's a really prerequisite to think about a lifelong use of these kind of technologies.
That's amazing. I mean, I imagine, like, you mentioned 15 years in the making, right? Like, what's the hardware change been like? I imagine there's all sorts of form factor changes over the years, right? Has it miniaturized? The core technology, the core principles have maintained the same? I mean, how does the battery life work? I've got so many questions.
Many good questions, and you can imagine there's been great ideas There's been also mistakes, obviously, wrong ideas that had been discarded over the time, and CorTec, as I mentioned, is also providing services to other companies in neurotechnology for components, electrodes, connectors, leads, overmolding, and in particular also the entire systems in the meanwhile. But this means CorTec has accumulated expertise in many different areas and has tried out and designed probably the best solutions for neurotechnology over the years. And we can proudly say that we have a very good overview of what's possible and what's not possible in neurotechnology. And that has helped to bring this device to the status where it is, which is an innovative, differentiated functionality that is safe and that can be implanted in patients for a lifelong period. Um, you mentioned the battery. There is no battery in this device, which is part of the design decisions that were taken early on, which are related to this lifelong longevity question. A battery in medical devices is problematic to a certain extent. First of all, they're dangerous. Second, they run out of juice. Eventually, they have to
Yeah.
be recharged or replaced. Then the device has to be replaced entirely, which is not what we want. So we have chosen to come up with a battery-less form factor. And so the device is wireless, and electricity transfer is also wireless through inductive methods. And that allows us to also transfer higher energy rates than you would be able to do with a battery-powered device. So it's very versatile and useful in that regard.
That's phenomenal. That's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, this is sort of like the future of all these implantable devices too. Like over years, all the different iterations of implantable devices have changed, right? And a lot of the criticism historically has been about like replacing devices and so forth. So to see so far ahead of the curve is amazing, man. It's really, really cool. I mean, what does the future look like for you guys? I mean, it's something you've got so much on right now, multiple indications, lots of different collaborations happening. What does the next sort of like 12 months or the next maybe 10 years look like for you guys?
I mean, our focus is to further validate our device in the clinic, right? And that's clearly where our focus is going. We at the same time we will also develop a second generation of the device, which is a bit smaller, which has a different periphery. You know, the how to capture the data, how to manage it. But the device itself will not change dramatically because we have shown it works and we will bank on that, right? Medical devices cannot change every year because of regulation, right? You
Mm,
need to, one point in time when you get to pivotal trial, you need to fix basically the functionality, the form
commit
factor
to
for
it.
safety
Yeah.
reason, for to maintain safety profile that you have established, and that's our focus for the moment. However, there's lots of ideas, right? We can work on different methods, algorithms to stimulate. We have a unique brain database established currently with brain data from epileptic patients and stroke patients, which is very unique. There's only very scarce amounts of data out there of brain data, longitudinal data. We have data of several months of brain data measured by our device and stored, so we can use that to discover biomarkers, to discover new treatments using AI, obviously, and we want to double down on that point too. We think we have established the interface, and now we can create data, generate data at scale.
The brain data conversation is one that is becoming more prevalent, right? Every week I'm learning about new companies, but obviously I'm meeting new people as well in the space. The brain foundational model terminology is something I feel like is relatively new, and a lot of companies have been accumulating brain data for a long time. Some of my clients, like the TMS space, for instance, have been doing it for decades, but I don't think we called it a foundational model. What's really interesting now, though, is the quality of the data is probably quite different, right? The quality of the technology and so forth. What's your plan or thoughts? I mean, I guess there's like a neuroethics debate to be had, and maybe that's another conversation for another day. But what are your
It
thoughts in this
certainly
space?
is. I think there's a lot of potential in this area, right? Because we're just discovering brain data overall, and the topic is the brain is not really understood, still
Mm.
not understood, and it's probably the last frontier of medicine if you think about it. And the brain as an electronic organ obviously is an information rich organ, and if you can measure the signals and make sense out of them, it will lead to very big insights into how humans think, and probably also how information can be processed overall. Today, when you think about AI, we still think about a lot now, obviously, in particular, about language models. Language is only a tiny piece of the information the brain is generating and can understand. As you know, and everybody knows, the brain is able to, at the same time, digest voice, sounds, images, feelings, a multitude of multimodal data which is processed at the same time. To date, no other technology in the universe can process that amount of information as the brain can. And we have not understood how it is done. So I believe that when we have established an interface to the brain, like our CorTec brain interchange, we have created the foundation to systematically capture brain data and then work with it. And we are absolutely committed to doing that and play an important role because we have the interface in our hands.
So, I mean, it's phenomenal stuff, isn't it, that's happening in space? And I think there's lots of conversations around, indications and understanding brain data and foundational models around specific indications, or for indications. Like depression is a big one, right? Understanding how the brain actually operates within that space, understanding it in greater detail is the key. But there's lots of money coming in from non-medical device people into the industry at the moment too. And, there's this probably quest for AGI that's happening. And you have the AI company billionaires investing into companies too. And Musk is probably the best example in talking about, wanting 30,000 people having a Neuralink implant by 2030. Those might not be accurate numbers, but close enough, I think, to what he said.
Yes.
It's an interesting ethical sort of realm right now, isn't it, about what people are trying to achieve? But I think the AGI quest is inevitable with what's going on. I mean, what are your thoughts on that perspective?
I think the capabilities that we are developing in the AI world are leapfrogging humanity forward in terms of the ability to understand information and disseminate information and link up to humans so that humans become much more capable, actually.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean necessarily immediately linking to the brain directly with a wire, if you want, but just making us more capable humans in all forms or shapes that you can imagine. That's the first point. But thinking about brain data, I do believe that we are only at the very start of a big development. We've seen, the internet emerge. We've seen technology, microprocessors emerge and take a leapfrog technology and human development. We see now, obviously, with space exploration, the next idea, and there's lots of fantasy in it. But I do believe brain data will be the next inflection curve, because once we have data at scale, we start to understand it. It will be something we cannot even imagine today, and it will uh, enable us to understand how the brain works. We can probably emulate it or simulate it. We can learn from it, and this will create technology that will generate a next leap in development for humanity in my mind. So I do believe the whole BCI thing that we see is just the start of a very, very big development over the next decades.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're in this perfect storm at the moment, aren't we, of like technological advancement with, we talk about AGI and whatever, but the reality is that there's this huge inflection point that happened, I think, about a decade ago with EEG reading and machine learning, and all of a sudden this huge increase in investment in neurotech, because all of a sudden we could start to make sense of these signals that we've been picking up for the last 100 years, and it's all part of the same thing. So it's rather than a quest for that or a result of this, it's so everything's happening at the same time, and it's accelerating really. So it's a very, very exciting time to see what we do. And I think, the brain is the final frontier. Neurodegenerative disease, mental health are two of the most maybe underserved corners of the industry, mainly because I think we haven't really understood how they work, and also the efficacy of the drugs hasn't always been the greatest. I think stroke rehab and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's medication, and it's not great. So it's really, really fascinating to see companies like yourself develop in that space. So thanks very much, Frank. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Chay. I appreciated the discussion and think we are up for a bright future in this area. We can help a lot of patients get a better life, bring back their independence. And I think that's what our motivation is in this field.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really, really excited to see the continued headlines come through and report them in the newsletter. But really, really appreciate all the work you've done so far, and thank you for taking the time today to chat.
Absolutely. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Carter Sciences, the headhunting practice that covers not only headhunting, but also fractional talent work for startups who need help but don't want to spend those big recruitment fees, wanting to work on a more hourly basis with companies, and also career coaching for neurotech professionals. The goal is to provide cost-effective solutions across all neurotech hiring needs.